It's nice when you have an idea for something that you think will be exciting for kids, and ones that have seemed to be the troublemaking group, the kids that are always looking to undermine, when they're actually on board and eager, that's always a reassuring sign. So that felt really good.
Wouldn't it be?
Welcome back to Diaries of a Mortal Entrepreneur, day 2. Feeling better. Today I would give it a 7 out of 10. Definitely on an upward trend. Did have our first camper crying, but we dealt with it, and let's dive in. So today we started with the warm-up game, and it went really well. I used a game that I'd learned from an improv class I had taken, and it was good, high energy, got the kids moving. They really seemed to enjoy it, and I think set a good tone for the day. And then jumped into finishing the first project that we were hoping to finish the day before. Took some pushing with some of the laggards, but we got there. That first project was a video in which they're telling any story they want about themselves, but including a lie within the story, and using some of the AI image generation tools to put in pictures for the story, and using some of the chatbots to see if they could help refine the scripts of their story and disguise their lie more effectively. What was very interesting was nothing about AI impressed them on an intellectual level. They compared image generation purely with what they could search on the internet. There was no magic to the computer's creation of the image, which I found interesting given how magical I find it. So it was purely results based. It was, what have you done for me? When it provided poor results, they were ready to move on quickly. But we finished the project, so that felt good. I did have one camper cry, and it took a little while in private with her to figure out that she really didn't feel comfortable sharing her video with the rest of the class, which is fair. It's not easy to share your stories in public. So it was good to at least figure it out, try to come up with a solution for her, and get her back to at least mildly engaged. Then we went into our presentation for the day, where I talked about the 7 basic plots that most stories can be categorized into. And that went really well. The kids were engaged, trying to think of stories for each of those types of plots, and I think laid a good foundation for a lot of what we're going to talk about in the coming days. We did a film study, and they really liked the video we chose, and I could see an improvement even from yesterday to today in terms of how they're just at least looking at the videos for the first time. And then we wrapped up by starting the next project, which is they're telling us a quest type story, but making it an actual immersive quest that the other campers will go through. And they seem to really be excited about the project. They jumped in, they formed their teams. So I think we're in a good place, going to be working on that project over the next couple days, and we'll see how it goes. My lesson of the day, or what I call Arvin learned stuff everybody already knows, is that the world is a kinder place than we sometimes are led to believe. My biggest hesitation around documenting this journey is it feels, at least this aspect of it, feels like a very commonplace start. My mom's been teaching for 30 years. There's millions of teachers out there that have to prepare for every day. So, just like, what am I doing? Actually trying to make this seem more grandiose than it is to run a camp for a couple of weeks. So, that was my hesitation around it. But I've been so pleasantly surprised by the feedback from people reaching out, wishing me well, checking in. And so that's been a really fantastic feeling. So I can't thank everyone who's watched enough. It's really helped balance the emotions and give me energy going into each day. The other lesson is you got to set a baseline if you want to show improvement. The fact is, these kids have not critically examined the stories that they watch for their entire lives. They view these as just pure entertainment. And to actually look at this will take practice. And it's been fun to see as we do these, having that kind of critical lens. I want to see how that evolves over the coming weeks. This is a journey, and if they were already super engaged in examining the stories from a very critical lens, would just mean that anything like this has less of a purpose. Highlight of the day, I'll just share two. One is the three kind of loud, rambunctious kids in the class. They seem to really gravitate towards this second project that we're starting, and they share their ideas, and they seem to be really treating this like a gaming quest. And it's nice when you have an idea for something that you think will be exciting for kids, and ones that have seemed to be the troublemaking group, the kids that are always looking to undermine. When they're actually on board and eager, that's always a reassuring sign. So that felt really good. The second was just seeing their engagement during the YouTube video that I had selected, because they learned some things, and one of them even at the end was like, wow, I had no idea how much work goes into being a YouTuber. And they noticed the actual transitions within the scenes, the editing, how clean it was. So that was fun to see them kind of react to that in a different way than they probably had previously. So those are the two highlights. The rest of the week, we'll be finishing up this project and look forward to checking back in. Before I leave, I'll share a clip from a podcast called the Science Fiction Podcast by this author and critic, Damian Walter. And he talks about how developing a critical relationship to stories instead of just viewing them as entertainment not only massively improves our overall ability as a society, but also our enjoyment of the stories themselves. So I'll also link to the entire podcast in the show notes. Last thing, apologies for the poor video quality yesterday. I forgot to turn the light on, and in the darkness, it looked a lot worse than I expected. So yeah, welcome to some 1980s footage for yesterday's video.
If you wanted to identify a single indicator that we today live in a civilization that is at least somewhat confused about itself, or possibly even in some stage of collapse, I think that there's a very strong argument that that indicator would be the idea of story as entertainment. That the reason you download Netflix for your iPads today, or go to the cinema, or in older times perhaps went to the theater, read novels, and that the reason why you're doing this is to be entertained. And that's such a commonplace idea today that I know that even when I say it, it's producing some resistance, because it's completely unfamiliar as an idea that there is really another purpose to storytelling. After all, what do we call the industry that currently makes all of our stories, at least on the industrial level of their production? We call it the entertainment industry. But this has some strange effects. It means that we are watching and engaging with stories with really very little conscious consideration of what the purpose or outcome or impact upon us of those stories might be. Imagine if you had an iPhone and you just randomly downloaded apps and software updates to your iPhone without any particular consideration of what they did, or whether they were functional, or whether they worked together or not. And your iPhone would quickly be trying to fulfill far too many purposes for you. The RAM would stop working. And we face a very similar situation today, because story is not just entertainment. Story is the operating system of human consciousness. That's a vast simplification. It's just a model of a much more nuanced idea, but it's good enough for us to talk about here and now, which is that when we have made stories across history for tens of thousands of years now, from the earliest cave paintings to today's fully immersive AAA video games, or any other media of storytelling, they're reflecting how our human consciousness operates. That's why the stories are immersive, and this gives stories a tremendous power Every story is like a software update for our consciousness, imparting new values, new models of behavior, new identities that we might wish to inhabit. And if we thought about that clearly, we might wonder then what our relationship to our storytelling is, and if it is causing some of the derangement in the world around us today. If you're a young man and you watch loads of films, which are much less common today, thankfully, but lots of stories about the glories of war and the patriotism of your society, and then you get recruited to go and fight in World War I on the back of that. All Quiet on the Western Front is a brilliant dramatization of this. You've been given the wrong software by the storytelling of your civilization. Because story is the operating system of your consciousness, of your mind, we might say. Every story you're ingesting is affecting your consciousness, affecting your psyche, your mind, however we want to frame that. Am I saying that the answer to this is to therefore not listen to stories or have a very Puritan engagement, only stories which have been vetted by some authority that they're going to give you the right values? No, not at all. In fact, the complete opposite of that. What I'm here to argue for is a critical relationship to our storytelling, that we apply all the critical thinking that at least some of us are trained to apply in the sciences, let's say, to scientific problems, that we have to apply this to our culture as well. This doesn't have to take the fun from our stories or the entertainment, indeed. Quite the opposite. When we take those stories which operate so deeply in our unconscious psyches, which is one of the reasons that stories are such powerful software updates for the operating system of our consciousness, because it's buried deep down in our unconscious. When we haul that up to the light of conscious, critical, reasoned examination, and we develop a deeper understanding of it, and then let it sink back down, our enjoyment of these stories is actually massively increased.